Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So thankful that you are here. Today I'm going to be talking about classes that every pre-med needs to take. So without further ado, let's just go into it. Um, the first class you need to take is biology with lab. Usually this is offered in 2 semesters, so general biology 1 and general biology 2, and there's going to be an accompanying lab class. And that lab class, usually once a week, you're going into the lab and doing some experiment that they're telling you about. You have to record your results, come up with a lab report, and submit it for grading. Usually the lab kind of corresponds with what you're learning in class, and this is a little bit beyond what you might encounter in an AP biology class, usually the first year of biology in college. And so this is something that usually is required for pre-meds to take to apply to med school. Another class that's usually required for pre-meds to take is general chemistry and the lab course associated with that. So same deal. The third class that's often required is organic chemistry with the lab course. Now, some schools just require the first semester of organic chemistry. Some schools require both semesters of organic chemistry. Some schools say you can take it pass-fail. Some schools say you have to take it graded. This is usually going to be one of the hardest classes that pre-meds feel like they're taking that's required for med school. And all three of these subjects show, actually, all four of these subjects show up on your MCAT in a pretty high, substantial amount. The classes that are most on the MCAT is both biology and chemistry, and a little bit less so of organic chemistry and physics. So the fourth class you have to take is physics with lab. The fifth class is English, or a writing intensive course. Now this is not for every single med school, and oftentimes most of the med schools I applied to didn't have English or writing intensive courses as requirements, but every so often there's a med school that does require this, so this is something that maybe you can think about. And the sixth is at least a semester of mathematics. Some schools require two. I think most require just one. And some schools say it has to be calcs. Some schools say it can be either statistics or calculus. But really, there's not really as heavy of a math requirement as a lot of students think there is. Going into college, you usually just have to take 1 or 2 semesters of math. It's usually a good idea to look at a couple of med schools and look at what is required for those med schools and what works for a couple of med schools. If you generally do this pathway, you will be completely fine for all the med schools that you're applying to. So I'm going to be talking also about things you should consider taking if you want to be kind of ahead the first year of your med school, and maybe just classes that would be useful to you because this is another question I get pretty often. So the first one is biochemistry, and this is actually the one thing that I want to asterisk. And maybe if you've watched until here, I'm just going to put it here too, because some med schools do require that you take biochemistry in your required pre-med courses. So that's my mistake. I should put it both there and here. So biochemistry is really extensive on the MCAT. Um, it's I'd say is just as much as general chemistry or general biology on the MCAT. So this is a really important topic for you to know, and just a course that even if it's not required for med school, you should absolutely take this course because it's absolutely critical and fundamental for med school and for your MCAT. And biochemistry is kind of like if you combine biology with organic chemistry. That's kind of what biochemistry is like. It's not at least for my experience, it wasn't as difficult as organic chemistry, but it was one of the more difficult science classes that were offered. The second course that I think a lot of students should consider taking is anatomy and physiology. Now, some schools offer this as just anatomy and just physiology as two separate courses. That's what my school did. And I'd say that both of these courses were very difficult for me, anatomy and physiology. This was kind of the first time that I was dealing with such a huge review of systems with so many things, so many moving parts to memorize. But I think that taking both of these classes was really beneficial for me in med school, at least for the first year, where I can kind of see quite a bit of overlap, not just with my med school curriculum for the first few months, but also with some of the step one content that I have to study. So these are two pretty helpful classes to take. Just be sure that you still do well in these classes. You don't want to be dragging down your GPA while kind of getting ahead for first year. Another class that I had no idea was so valuable is microbiology. So micro is such a dreaded subject in my class just because it's very difficult to memorize all the bacteria and fungi and viruses and parasites and protozoa that are going on in the human biology system. So taking microbiology in college is actually a pretty good step towards kind of being able to learn that material within med school. Not at all a requirement. Another class is cell biology. Cell biology, I think, was probably the hardest biology class that I had taken in college. It sounded pretty simple just based on looking at it, just knowing how short the name is. But cell biology was a pretty difficult class, and so that is something that you should consider. And it's usually an advanced biology class offered at your school. I took psychology. I took one class on sociology, but didn't really overlap too well with the MCAT. But both psychology and sociology, if you've looked into the MCAT material, you'll know that psychology and sociology is a section on the MCAT. So it makes up 25% of your MCAT exam score, which is really significant considering that the other 25% is, biology, chemistry, biochemistry. And so psychology and sociology, a lot of students don't even take a course on psych and soc. And this is kind of very bread and butter stuff that you have to know for the MCAT. So it's pretty helpful to take a class on this. One psychology class, one sociology class. You don't have to. You can totally self-study and you'll be fine. But that's something you might consider. I just included this because if there's any class that kind of gives you some like level of communication or medical terminology, those are pretty helpful classes you can take. At my school, there was a class that would put you in the emergency room and kind of let you shadow doctors and get 1 credit out of that shadowing. And I thought that was a really great class just for giving students the ability to learn some skills of being around medical professionals. Okay, if there's an ethics class or medical ethics class, I think those are pretty interesting classes you can take. It might help you a little bit in the interview, just thinking about ethics and situations and expanding your mind a little bit, learning about the history of medicine. Those are all pretty interesting things if you're deciding to be in this field. This is probably a little bit less of an important class for you to consider, but still like very valuable for you to think about this. One of my friends is actually doing research in medical ethics, and so this is actually a really important thing that he had studied in undergrad that kind of led him to study medical ethics at medical school. Okay, if you have a public health school, we actually do learn quite a bit of public health in medical school in the first year, something that's also covered in the Step 1 curriculum. So this might be a little bit helpful for you. Again, not that important for you to consider in the undergrad. Research methods, so any sort of research class that's kind of teaching you how to do basic science or clinical research, or any opportunity to get in the lab, these are all pretty useful classes that you might be able to take and will help you out in the future. And then maybe if you want to take a foreign language, I certainly didn't in college because I'm really awful at foreign languages, but if you want to take a language and Spanish or something, it's really great for medical professionals to be able to speak with non-English speaking patients and kind of be able to translate when necessary. And so this is also something you might consider. But again, I really encourage you to look at the specific requirements and recommendations. Again, these are the 7 classes that you should absolutely consider taking. I'm sorry for not including biochemistry on this, but these are kind of things that you should absolutely consider taking, or you should absolutely take, and these are kind of things that you should consider taking. If One last thing that I'll note is that if you take sort of all these classes, you'll probably be very close to receiving a minor in biology in your school. Most schools kind of work like that, where if you're taking, general biology with the lab, general chemistry, general physics, organic chemistry, biochemistry, you're probably going to be pretty close to receiving a biology minor. So that's also something to look at. If you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer them in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.